This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au. Keep moving with Australia's #1 address in property.
It is great to have your company here on Business Now. Well, we are well and truly into the spring selling season for homes, and markets continue to shift ever so marginally across the country. 1,859 auctions, and just over 67% of these were sold. And that, I've got to tell you, is pretty solid. In Sydney, to me at least anyway, the market appears to be off the boil over the weekend. 685 auctions. The clearance rate there, 63.6%. Melbourne, though, which has been dragging its heels, is clearly picking up. 776 auctions there, and more than 72% of those were sold. Brisbane, stronger again, 85 auctions, almost 78% of those were successful. Adelaide too remains in good shape, 54 auctions, almost 76% of those were sold. And Canberra had 45 auctions and almost 78% of those resulted in a sale. So let's bring in here Anne Flaherty, economist with REA Group. And first things first, have you tried to work out why it seems that the Sydney auction market especially seems to be dragging its heels compared with other capital cities right now?
Well, it's one of the funny things about those auction clearance rates is that some markets we typically see better clearance rates on average. Melbourne, for example, we typically see higher clearance rates than Sydney, which is normally at the other end of the spectrum. However, sometimes it doesn't correlate that well with what we're seeing with home value changes. So Sydney actually last month recorded the strongest rise of any capital. Melbourne is ticking along. It's certainly picking up, but recorded around half the level of growth of Sydney.
So that's peculiar, isn't it? Because you'd imagine that if you're seeing people potentially overpaying for properties, which would push up those home price indices, that is likely to be happening at an auction, not in a private sale, where people tend to negotiate a little bit harder.
Yeah, that's right. And it comes down to the nuances of different markets around the country. And of course, we know that in a lot of markets around the country, vendors really don't like to sell via auction. Perth being the classic example there, where we typically see the vast majority of homes sell via private sale.
So it's interesting because, again, you look at annual growth and you've got Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth all in the 9% last year. You've got Sydney 3.7%, Melbourne 2.1%. As you and I have talked about before, there's a bit of catch-up that's got to go into Melbourne, given the fact that he's likely to see some of the strongest sort of population growth over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and it's very much a question of when it comes to Melbourne. I think a lot of people for quite a while now have been saying, look, properties are undervalued in the city, particularly apartment stock in Melbourne. You can't build it for the price at which it's selling at the moment, which means that it's clearly a situation where there's a lot of undervalued homes there. What we are seeing, though, is that buyer interest is really picking up. There's some very strong forward indicators if we look at Melbourne. Searches in particular have seen very strong rise year on year when it comes to people looking to buy in Melbourne. We have seen searches up across the country, but Melbourne in particular, we've seen some very strong growth.
And that could be bargain hunters trying to get into the marketplace. But given the fact there's potentially 2-3 interest rate cuts coming, I noticed the Reserve Bank governor watered that down last week just a little. Now markets are suggesting just 2 rate cuts to come in November and March next year. Do you sense that might just taper off some of that exuberance?
Well, I think that's still broadly in line with what a lot of people were expecting interest rates to do. And even if you look at the 3 interest rate cuts we've had this year, they have had a pretty significant impact on the market. In particular, if we look at the August rate cut, the month following, we really saw some very strong growth in prices around the country. And if we look at, again, those forward indicators, expectations of future prices, overwhelmingly, people think that prices are heading upwards. And I think that is driving that sense of FOMO we're certainly seeing in the market right now. And I think what will be very interesting as we head into spring is, will that increase in buyer demand be matched by equivalent increase in properties for sale, or are we going to see that buyer demand exceed properties for sale, which could lead to even stronger price gains than we may have factored in?
And just in a couple of seconds, is regional areas shown the same trends as the city areas?
It very much depends where you're looking. And again, if we look back in Victoria, 3 of the standout regions have been Bendigo, Ballarat and Geelong, which have seen year on year some extremely strong increases in search activities. Other places around the country where we're really starting to see a pickup in demand in regional areas are the Riverina and also the Far West and Arana areas. So certainly those are some of the areas where we would anticipate a bit of an outperformance.
I'll tell you what, always good having the program, Anne Flaherty. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you.